Huh?
No base sleeves.
People are on this. Hello, everybody. My name is Scott Artley. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I'm the Accessibility Program Director at the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, also known as MRAC. I'm also a disabled artist myself. I am a white masculine presenting person in my now officially late 30s. And I'm sitting wearing I have bald head, buzzed head, short orangish beard, square glasses, gray sweatshirt, and I am sitting in my colorful office filled with way too many books, / there can never be way too many books. I'm really excited to be having everyone join us tonight. We've got a full room, which is very exciting for our third Arts and Disability Forum event. Few housekeeping items as we start this event. Closed captioning is available using the CC button or captions option in the menu. If you prefer to see captions in a separate browser window, you can use the stream text link that my colleague Sam is going to be putting into the chat now. We also have 2 AFL interpreters who will be spotlit at the top of everyone's video screens. We're also going to be recording today. We are currently recording. So hello to the people of the future watching this right now. The recording will have edited captions. We'll put it up on YouTube, and those captions can be translated into other languages, which is great. Finally, we have over 200 people registered for this event. It blows my mind, and it blows our previous records of registrations out of the water. So we discovered very recently that our Zoom subscription means we can only have 100 people logged in at any one time. Maybe it won't be a problem, but I'm putting my apologies out into the universe right this minute in case anyone is not able to participate. I'm blessed. We're blessed to have this problem and excited to find solutions for the future. If for whatever reason you're not able to view this going forward, we will have the event recording, so check that out. And be sure, if you haven't already, to register for the event. If you got this link sent to you or whatever, you can also register for the event. And we're going to be sending out resources after the fact. And so we'll send it out to everyone who registered for the event. So the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, our mission is to improve arts access for communities in the 7-county metropolitan area through support to artists and organizations. One of the ways that we meet this mission is by hosting public conversations about key issues facing the community. I encourage you to check out MRAC's YouTube page to discover some of the amazing events in our archive. This evening's event is the third of our Arts and Disability Forum events, which is a platform uplifting artists with disabilities and accessible art making in the region. Tonight's event is titled Disability and Identity. In my work with MRAC, I am in constant conversation with people, and it's such a joy in my life. And so many of those conversations are about identity. I speak with applicants, with grantees, fellow MRAC staff, board members, colleagues at other organizations. My friends want me to stop talking about it all the time, I'm sure, but identity is one of those key conversation topics that keeps coming up because it is so important. And so I'm so thrilled to be able to invite these 3 amazing artists who I've known for quite a while now to have a conversation that I've had with each of them in little bits, and I'm excited to bring them together. I'm especially excited to bring my colleague Jamie on, longtime artistic collaborator, friend. I once worked for Jamie, and I think someday I will probably work for Jamie again. And I'm so glad that she's agreed to help moderate this discussion tonight. So as a panelist and as a participant, as a moderator. I am going to be putting the information about a couple of our panelists who have we've suggested, hey, you folks are artists who are like living the grind, and so we want to make every opportunity possible for you to make money off what you do. We are paying, MRAC is paying these folks to be here tonight, but if you want to show them some additional financial love, this is one way to do that. So I will be adding their Cash App, Venmo, PayPal information here. So if you feel, tip away, if you feel like, oh, that was such a brilliant moment, like throw them a little bit of extra cash. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. With that, I'm going to pass it along to Jamie. If you have any needs throughout this event, feel free to private message myself or Sam, also listed as MRAC under the participants. And with that, I look forward to hearing this conversation. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having us. I'm Jamie Kalakaru-Mava, and my pronouns are she, her. I am sitting in an orange room right now. I'm wearing a green Icelandic sweater. I've got my hair up. If I look tired, as others in Minnesota know, we're kind of navigating a unique weather situation. And I'm feeling very 2020 today because we're stuck at home, not going anywhere with no childcare and trying to do all the things. But thanks so much for having us. I'm really grateful to moderate, but I'm also just super excited to listen. And as I scrolled through seeing the folks in the room, I know there's like so many other wonderful artists in here. So really excited to dig into the conversation and questions. As we met before and we talked about how we wanted to introduce ourselves, we just wanted to take a moment to recognize that we and a lot of other folks in this room are working artists. We are curators, writers, painters. I myself am a writer and a painter. And so we just think that that's important. Like when we talk about the aspects of our identity and disability as identity, identifying as artists and claiming that is like also a part of the process. So I want to introduce my two co-panelists. Taja, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, MRAC, for having a series of these. I can't see who all is here, but I'm so happy that you're here, whether it is to learn or to also be felt, to connect with other disabled artists, and both at the same time. I am Taja Will. I am a cinnamon-colored skin, non-binary, soft femme here today in Bereota Tunwe, Minnesota Makoche, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am primarily known as a choreographer artistically. I also do organizational consulting on many intersections of justice and equity and disability and relationship. Yeah, the question that we said we would start with is, how has the last 2 years impacted our art as a way to introduce ourselves? And I don't think that it's any one way. I've stretched to new mediums. I've rested. I've collapsed. I've rebelled. I have embraced limitation, and I've completely overdone it sometimes. And right now, tonight, I'm really joyful. I'm grateful for that.
My name is Atlas Phoenix. I'm an auteur. I tell stories through film, sometimes narrative film, sometimes personal essays about my life. I also write, direct, produce, and some other things I'm probably forgetting, but I do a lot of things, and I've been doing a lot of things for about 30 plus years now. I came to Minneapolis in '91, so it's been about 32 years now since I've been here. And let's see what else. I have low energy today because I was hoping to actually get a grant today, and that would have improved my housing situation. I currently live in a place where I was recently asked about my sexuality, my gender expression, and if I had changed my name. And I had looked at a house and was hoping to be able to make the deposit and rent at the beginning of next week, and was unable to because I didn't get the grant. And so I've had to process that for the last 2 hours. And then I also remembered while I was processing that and thinking of who I would like to spend this time with, today is also the 3-year anniversary of losing the love of my life. And the last time I ever held them was today. And so I'm kind of dealing with some heavy stuff today. And I was given the option to leave, not to be part of tonight, but that actually would have made me feel worse. And so I'm really grateful to be here and to talk with Taja and Jamie and see what we can provide and be helpful with to you all today. I'm thankful that you all are here and that so many of you are here. And despite how the day started, I'm still pretty grateful to be here today. And that's really it. And the pandemic, wow, that's a whole nother Zoom. But I did, I, did embrace change. I did embrace limitations. I started and graduated from dialectical behavioral therapy. And then a month later, I graduated and started and graduated trauma therapy. And I also stopped working with my traditional therapist of 12 years and had a trauma graduation party in November. And now we just do check-ins, and it looks like I'll be starting EMDR probably next week. So I'm just working on my mental health, and that's really about it. And the film I'm working on is about my transition and mental health journey. It's called Beautiful Boy, and it's tracking all of this work for the last 3 years. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Alice. We're grateful to be able to share space with you. And yeah, thanks for being here. Something that came up in our conversation that we wanted to talk about is, in addition to the past 2 years, shifting things for us. That component of disability as identity means something different for everybody. And this comes up also in conversations about race, in rooms with other folks that are mixed race. There's a lot of this feeling of not enoughness. And I know that a lot of other folks that are also disabled they don't want to claim that because they don't want to take up space that could rightfully be for somebody else, or coming to terms with that is everybody's own unique journey. So I'm curious, Atlas and Taja, if you want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to you to identify as disabled, or how do you recognize that? How do you phrase that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Would you like to go first, Tasha?
I'm open. Would you like to?
It doesn't matter.
I can go.
Coin? Okay, I'll find a quarter.
Well, this question, actually makes me think of an incredible experience that I had a couple of years ago, where someone reached out to me and they found me over Facebook and they said, I heard you're disabled and I'm wondering if you'd like to talk about it for American Theater Journal. And I didn't know any of the other people who were brought together into this Zoom room, to chat about being disabled. And immediately my brain went to, I'm not disabled enough to be here. And the first thing we talked about is how we all felt not disabled enough to be here. And it makes me think about my values around care work, because I know other folks who have the same chronic illness I do might not identify as disabled. And identifying as disabled doesn't mean one monolithic thing in any way. And it also does not mean that my disability today feels the same tomorrow. It's in such great fluctuation. And so for me, identifying as disabled, to put that forward, is to actually talk about how I can be in attention in any time that I am in relationship, which is right now, when I'm teaching, when I'm creating art. And for me, I feel like about 80% of my attention available to me is probably on symptom management.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. And so by telling people that, I was going to say disclosing, but disclosure feels like it has a weightedness that I'm not invested in. But by sharing from a vulnerable and sometimes a harder vulnerable place to advocate for myself, then I'm really letting people in on how I am being inattention in the room. And it helps me to say, my disability has these needs. And then I free myself up from any of the ways that I'm trying to endure a able body supremacy in the room that's either overt or covert, because it's usually there. And I think perhaps I hypothesize, maybe I help someone else who maybe doesn't identify as disabled, or maybe does, and is also in their own world of managing some kind of attention to be present.
Yeah, I like what you have to say about that. How do I identify? Part of the reason I was brought into this panel was Scott Artley noticed that I had been written up in the Star Tribune last June. I was part of a cabaret called Off Kilter Cabaret for Off Leash Productions, and I had written an idea for a story that I wanted to do called Ordinary. And the assignment for the application was called Organ Recital, and you were supposed to pick an organ of your body and talk about it socio-politically, personally, privately. And I chose my skin, and it seemed like the right thing to choose in light of George Floyd's brutal murder. And a couple of months later, my application was accepted. And by that time, my thoughts had expanded beyond just skin color, because I was about to get top surgery later in that year. And so it was like, oh, your skin really impacts a lot of things, not just the color, but even your disability. Like I have bipolar disorder and a slew of other mental health disorders that I balance every day. There's ADHD, low-level autism, been diagnosed as schizophrenic, and then bipolar. I think that's enough. And so, I have an invisible disability, and my skin hides that, because when people see me, they don't necessarily see this. And because of the color of my skin, they don't actually necessarily see me. And so that's a bit of a social disability that isn't actually mine. That's the people who perceive me that have a problem with my skin color. And so, it led me to an entire journey around identity. And in the Star Tribune article, it was the first time I'd ever actually said that I resigned from identity, and the only one that I kept, which is actually meaningful to me, is the mental disability aspect, because we are our mental health, and if we don't take care of our mental health, then who are we? And that was something that I needed to spend time thinking about. And so in the Star Tribune article, I am quoted as saying that I have resigned from being Black, biracial, homosexual, and transgender. Because at the end of the day, these identities don't actually describe who I am as a spiritual human being. And I only want to be seen as a human being, regardless of what's going on in my head. Because at the end of the day, I'm just a good person who's trying to spread love and give love. And the hardest part of that, what I feel is my job as a human being, is learning to receive love. And I'm really good at giving it, but sometimes it's hard for me to receive it based on the abuse that I sustained as a child in my parental home. And so identity is so much bigger for me personally, and it's also just deeply insignificant, because when you talk with someone, you decide on that energy if you want to continue this conversation further. And sometimes you fall into this trap where maybe this person seemed cool, and then they said that one thing that suddenly made you close the door, and a password won't work anymore, and you find yourself awkwardly navigating your way away from the conversation, be it on a dating app, or be it like with a friend that's even a close friend, and they said something and you're like, oh, I just need to exit this conversation. Maybe we could start a new conversation on another day. And so it's like the idea of a safe space, to me, doesn't exist outside of your brain, outside of your heart. That's where the safe space is for me. And so that's the thing that I cultivate. I can't make a physical safe space outside of my body. It has to come from within, and then it comes out in my conversations with people when I do decide to walk out of a conversation, or when I do decide to stay for a little bit longer and learn more about this human being that's opening themselves up to me. And that's more of what I identify with. And that going out and looking at people and not looking at their skin color and their hairstyle or what they're wearing and what it must mean is so liberating, because now I look at human beings and I think, oh, I really like their combination, and I couldn't see anybody else wearing what they're wearing because it just suits them so well. And it's liberating to actually see people this way, because it really opens up your heart, and it's like a lotus and it just blooms, and then you can feel that beautiful pressure around your diaphragm and it just pushes up. And then there's this thing that goes way above your head. And that's the best way I can describe it. And it's an act of ascension. And that's the best I can describe it for me personally.
I think that's really beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. I love that notion of like sewa and like that tender heart that we're like maintaining in that safe space. When I think about this identity as disability, I think of it's that internal struggle combined with that external struggle, and just that Taja, to your point about like not disabled enough to be in that space, or those qualifiers we put on ourselves. I feel like the past 2 years have been really illuminating what we've kind of accepted or like have gotten through. Like in some ways things have become more accessible, like in having access to spaces and doing things online, but then also just the physical spaces that haven't necessarily come as far as they need to go. And for me, like that sort of normalization of what we've set up as like the standard, and like a lot of the access points that we've kind of denied so many people, both like just physically and intellectually, like those spaces. So yeah, I think that for me it's about that natural state, and then also stepping out into like how the world is set up and how we're just expecting people to like adapt to this and adapt to that, and not necessarily set up all our spaces for being inclusive. And there's so many nonprofits and organizations that we love and really, that support our work, but they have these really lofty statements about inclusivity and access, and even like the codes that we have in ADA codes, they're not in compliance with that, let alone those extra steps to make sure that they're accessible to folks with, that aren't neurotypical and that don't have these things. So I'm curious about like how, with your creative practice, how have you, I love what you said, Atlas, about like your heart being that safe space and your mind being that safe space. And I feel like my mind is not necessarily always the safe space, because my mind is also saying like those not enoughness are coming from and it's been a journey to quiet that voice.
Right.
But I'm curious how you set up your creative spaces. I was going to ask about studio spaces and those spaces, but now I'm curious, how have you set up those creative internal and external spaces to be those safe spaces for creation and activity?
Well, I live in a pretty hostile environment. I live in a very busy street, and regularly I hear people being shot. And so I hear a lot of argument during the day. I hear a lot of arguments within the building in the halls, because I live on the first floor. And so I still have to create work under those conditions. And I created a lot of work, but I think my work could have been better had I had the peace and quiet that I needed, which is what I was trying to get with this house. And so what I've done is just very rigidly just tuned things out because I needed to. And I recently held an event that was the first of its kind in the Twin Cities. It was called Translate, and it was held for and centering trans, intersex, and non-binary and agender people. And I was very well aware, and for our allies as well, I was very well aware that a lot of folks in the acronym have some form or another of neurodivergency, and that some of these people by a large margin were disabled, whether they thought they were disabled enough to be called disabled, or whether they were flat out like, yes, I'm disabled and these are the things that I need for my disability. When I didn't put together a mission statement necessarily for Translate, but we put together a very impactful accessibility statement, both like for the cast and performers, for the audience, and also for general. So we had 3 different accessibility statements that were written by the wonderful Minda May. And it was beautiful. It took almost 2 weeks. Like, we were able to actually put the statements up literally 3 days before the event. But it was beautiful. And I just wanted to make sure, you know, like I kept telling people, we have accessibility statements coming up and these are the things, and we wanted to get 2 ASL interpreters, which we were unfortunately unable to get. We made floor space for folks who are using wheelchairs and for their companions. We had a Zoom set up in case people had some social anxiety around the pandemic or just in general with their mental health. And so we had the show was hybrid, and it was in a physical space at Bryan Lake Bowl. So you could pay to watch it in person, or you could pay to watch it at home, and you could tip from home. You could tip the performers. In the physical space, we had a DJ, we had the performers, and then we changed over the night and made half the floor a dance room, and the other half the floor was a free buffet for people. And it was a highly successful event, and it sold out three days before the event, which was surprising and not surprising. But it was one of those things where I really had to take into consideration that I'm creating this and I'm producing this for my community, and I'm working with a wonderful producer for Transcendence Cabaret and an amazing DJ so that we can all put this together. And it was really, really important to me. Just, I can't even express how important it was for me to make sure that folks who either identified as disabled, or maybe didn't think they were disabled enough, or maybe just didn't identify it, that they felt that this was a space that they could create a safe space for themselves in. And that was really important to me. And with my creative work outside of Translate, you know, I have closed captioning for my films, which I create myself. And I also generate it in different languages because the same sentence means something different around the world. And so that was important to me. And I will also start considering a way to add audio description to my films to make them even more impactful for folks. And so yeah, I just try to bring that in, and I know like it needs to be accessible, and that's a part of the language of creating my work. Is it accessible to everyone, and who is everyone?
Thank you for that, Atlas. I love this question of care work, and I feel like so much of my culture work is focused on care work, and it's focused on the intersections and the simultaneities. So I am simultaneously disabled and queer. I'm simultaneously queer and non-binary. I'm simultaneously brown and not from the US. All of these, you know, make up identity, to speak to that part, but they all also are interacting in this simultaneous way of many needs and many sensitivities and many lenses on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't imagine that I'm the only person who is doing all of that work at one time. So when I'm creating creative space, I'm really trying to think about all of the ways that I am making it welcoming. I think about that invitation a lot, from collaborators to contractors to audience care. And I hear so much of that in what you just said, Atlas. I think about it also a lot from my space where I'm making live performance. Usually I'm making dance, and I'm thinking about how we are with each other. And I'm also thinking about how hierarchies of the field have existed historically. So in resistance to many of those, there's not any expectation that we leave our bad day at the door, or that the injury has to be pushed through. That would never be a qualifier in the spaces that I'm in leadership in.
Mhm.
I'm thinking about how we don't have a value on time as money. I will tell my collaborators this because it is true to me. I take lateness personally. And it's one of the really like hard sticking points is that I take lateness so personally, but it's not actually a value on punctuality. It's more about my enthusiasm of being in the work. I understand that lateness is something that always may need to happen. So time is not money. We're not getting our most out of our studio hours. Also resisting rigid timelines. The production is not overpowering our ability to be in really fertile creative space, which means snacks, which means breaks, which means, massage tools in the dance studio and 45-minute warm-ups. I'm really resisting the pressure to produce and thinking about scale as like a helpful advocate in the room, a kind of morphing advocate of what's the scale. How can I change the scale to help us be in the room and feel like we're staying grounded instead of pushing our bodies over? The body will respond to that push. It will respond to when the focus narrows with all of the muscles and all of the tissues. Our bodies are really good at that. That's a fight response. And how do we get to our most creative place if we're in a fight response?
Mhm.
So how do we come back into tensegrity, which is so important for dancers, movers, for all of us, but
Mhm.
especially in a dance creative space. And I also think about how I'm going to care for the audience, because I find that too often I feel trapped in an audience role, that I would disrupt something if I left, or if I needed to make a sound, or if I am sounding along, or if I need to fidget or have a snack during a performance. And that has been really hard as someone who wants to go to a lot of performances, but also feel the freedom to get out of a very uncomfortable chair and move. So I'm thinking about how we care for an audience, how we give them options, and how resisting those hierarchies or audience etiquette behaviors opens up space for people to be present in different ways. And one of the other things this makes me think about, because I had this conversation with a choreographer that I'm collaborating with recently, I asked her if she was ready for me to not perform the work after we've rehearsed the entire work. And I've been saying this since I came out of remission with my chronic illness. Every time we have a performance, not like every time we have a run, but every time there's a performance, my collaborators know that it's possible that I could leave and not come back, and the show could continue. And it is flexible enough. Any performance is flexible enough. It could also choose to end. We don't owe funders, audience, each other a performance if it will actually harm our bodies in any way, our minds, bodies, ourselves to be there. So there's no guarantee. And I had to check in with this choreographer, and we had a really great conversation about it, because it's something I always say, and I hadn't said it yet. And also that transparency of being able to share that. Like, I can't guarantee you a performance, but I will be at the rehearsals because I'm devoted to you. I'm devoted to the work. And we'll see how I am that day. And I think that feels radical. And I'm prepared to hear that too. It feels radical because there's so much, especially in funding structures, especially in commissions and being produced, it's an honor, but it's also an expectation. And I know that I have self-harmed by going too far and working too hard when I actually needed to not. And I think the more we can be transparent with that and be flexible with that, it sounds kind of wild to be like, you could drop out of an entire show, you'd have to pay back your commission. But I do really think that that can be more possible, that artists can shape and change more often. And we did see this in the COVID pandemic. We saw it done beautifully by people in power of venues and money. And we also saw big failures to pivot. So learning something from all of those moments.
Yeah, I really love what you're saying, and part of me wants to be like, wow, that's, you're really lucky, blah 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 blah. But like, that's not actually it. You're right, it's radical, and we need to normalize that kind of vulnerability. And that's, it's sort of like that positive vibes only thing. That's actually just not a thing. That's actually quite toxic. It's a toxic statement because that doesn't allow for the fluctuation of our mental health and our physical health. And we are more than just a societal aspect. We're also a physiological and a psychological being. And so to be able to say what you said and to have that validated actually makes your body feel so much better. It's more than just your mind. Your body is able to get out of that kind of like flight response. And then you can just say, okay, I can do what I can do, and that's accepted, and that is enough. And then you don't worry about being disabled enough to say this, and then also be willing to be like, okay, well, they're not going to go with it, and then you can make your own decision. Do you still want to be a part of the production? So it gives you more flexibility too, and it respects your sovereignty, your autonomy, and your agency. That's the three key things right there. And part of that comes from being self-awareness, being self-aware, and being able to just say, I'm just going to wing it. I'm just going to ask for this. I'm just going to say this, and I have no control over the answer, but I will respond accordingly. And but at least you have that base, and that base starts with vulnerability, which is that kind of like I want to say the base is vulnerability, which is, oh, I lost the thought, but it's really like the cornerstone of like being able to express what you need. And so I think that's great, and I'd like to see more of that normalized. They have understudies for plays for a reason. And so, there's no reason why that can't be worked out in any kind of art form that we do, particularly when you're talking about dancing as well. And so, I think that's great that you have this opportunity with your collaborator to be able to say this, and then have that deep, difficult conversation that still ends on a radically beautiful note. That says a lot about the humanity of both of you, I think.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and thank you for sharing that. It makes me think of two things. It makes me think of one, this like push of capitalism to just extract as much out of bodies as we can, even if that means that they become broken and torn, and it just that myth of that rugged individualism that extends to how we view artists, and how we'll only value them as long as they're producing artists. And I think and I appreciate that we're here for that MRAC is bringing us together, but I think funders in general, like, we're so production heavy, like they're funding the production of new works. They're not funding mental health breaks for artists, and it's stitched into our very funding. And I'm like, I want to see pushback against that. I'm starting to see more. I'm grateful that MRAC is doing like the Artist Futures grants and things like that, because I think it pushes back on that notion that artists are only valuable to us as long as they're producing works for us to consume, and moving away from that sort of capitalist mentality towards art. And then just that notion that like that perfectionism, like that you have to do that show, you have to do it in the way it has to follow that script, and that like that stitching into like perfectionism as a function of white supremacy. And I really do think art and creativity and culture is like a way we push back against that, and it's a way we create a sense of belonging and like challenge some of those norms. I'm really curious, like the next question that we had is like, what does autonomy look like? But I think we're talking so much about collaboration, and it's I'm curious how you would approach that question. What does autonomy look like? How do we cultivate that in creative spaces? And is it about strictly autonomy, and does that look like collaboration? I mean, how does that show up? Taja, do you want to take that first, especially since you were just talking about your collaboration?
Yeah, I actually was just writing down something Atlas said, which you said autonomy, sovereignty, and agency. And I really like those three words together. In some ways, I feel like autonomy suggests singular, and I have no desire to be singular in many ways, but I do want to have agency. And I also think about what does it look like to be emboldened, and having the conditions in the room, having the conditions in the contracts, in the collaborations to be emboldened feels like agency, feels like I can know that I'm going to have what I need. And what I need is everything creatively, but also so much for me is having a baseline of wellness, and wellness feels like such a co-opted word, but a baseline of wellness to even show up to the artistic, to the creative. And to speak of funding, so much of that is not available because it's not necessarily created at all stages of an artist's journey. And of course, I'm crossing out too many things because there's plenty of that. It's just not as, what do I want to say if I'm cautious? It's hard to access. I mean, there are fellowships for emerging artists, for mid-career artists, for our celebrated artists who have long careers. And the idea of an artist being able to baseline, a disabled artist in all those simultaneous identities, to be able to baseline our lives so that our creative autonomy, agency, and sovereignty feel secure. I think there's far too little for that. And then we all do the hustle, and the hustle's different for, again, intersectional, but for disabled artists. I don't have a hustle anymore. I don't have the energy for a hustle. And that fluctuates too. With my condition now, I can't imagine having the 9-to-5 I used to have. I wouldn't have the energy for it. So to baseline, again, it's money, it's time, it's energy, and it's really expensive to be disabled.
Yes, I agree with you.
I'm like laughing, and it's not funny to me most days. It's not funny at all. It's really hard to find that baseline. So to feel fully resourced so that I have autonomy and agency in my choice making, that I feel like my art and creative process has its own sovereignty. I think maybe I'm still dreaming about that. And I know I've been incredibly privileged in my artistic support, that I have felt moments of that. I have felt moments of creating something that is fully realized and feeling my baseline being supported. What would it be like to have that more often in an achievable cycle, not a production and crash or work crash, not to work in simply a transactional way because I have to gig enough to make enough money so that I can afford the extra fees for grocery delivery because my body can't go get the groceries. And I think I'm just thinking out loud right now because it seems so much like a dream in many ways, to have housing security, to really know that I'm coming from a resource baseline, especially for my disability, especially because I know that when my baseline is weak or I'm struggling, there's not much beyond that I can do.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of that. And that's some of what I was dealing with today with the housing security and all of that. And, I'm on disability, so I could not afford this beautiful home on my own. And so the Arts Futures grant would have been able to help me with that. And like I'm happy for the people that did get it, and I'm still holding that space for myself because I'm still stuck in this situation, which deeply impacts my ability to be fully creative. And so I feel like I'm maybe doing 20% of what I could actually be doing if I lived in a place that didn't have any of the things going on. If I was able to have steady groceries, and to be able to just not worry, like I've had extra SNAP benefits because of COVID, and next month that's my last additional money. And so now I have to figure out how to get that additional $200 every month because I've gotten used to it for 3 years. And it's, I've been able to eat healthier. I've lost so much weight. I've toned up. And when you eat better, you think better. And unfortunately, with the kind of money that you do get from the government to pay for food, it's a lot of carbs, it's a lot of fillers, it's a lot of like not great food. And so that's another thing that I'm going to have to deal with in the struggle starting in April. And that's something that obviously the grant would have been able to help. And so I'm glad that, there are fellowships and grants that are out there that are just unrestricted so that you can do what you need to do to thrive as an artist. And I still have some opportunities later this year to apply for those opportunities. And so I'm excited about that. But yeah, I would say that living where I live, the amount of money that I have, I also had to come to terms that I can no longer gig, and I just don't have the bandwidth to do my own stuff plus gig. And so I have one last gig that I'm doing for a dear organization that means a lot to me. And then that's it. Like I'm not teaching anymore. I'm not, until I get Beautiful Boy done, I'm just not gigging anymore. Beautiful Boy is the gig. And I'm recording footage by myself every day. And so I recently got a grant to get a video recorder and a videographer, and to put down a multi-layered merchandising that I'm going to be having up in April. I'm doing a retrospective of my 4 films and a music video at Trilon Cinema. And so I'm doing all of these things, but if I was gigging, I wouldn't have the ability to like get these things done. And so I had to make a very difficult decision late last year and just be like, you can't do this anymore. Like, don't run after money, because then your art suffers. Do your art, and then the money, wherever it comes, will come. And money always, flows in and out. And I've been poor for 95% of my life. And so it's like, yeah, money comes and goes, and you just got to do the best you can with it when you got it. And don't overextend yourself, because then you don't have sovereignty, and then you don't have the autonomy, and then your agency like gets confused on how you get confused on how to use it. And it's just like, like I think I wrote something that was like accountability, awareness, agency, and there's another A. There's like 3 A's that I came up with for like how I deal with my mental health. And yes, accountability, awareness, and something else. And so it's just, those are the things that I kind of like look at when I decide to begin piece of work, or re-edit it to shape it up and make it better. And that's kind of like the process. I've had, also a lot of privilege in the last 7, I think 5 or 6 years, where I've gotten grants consistently, and I've been able to produce 3 short films, and all of them have gotten into festivals, and one of them is a multi-award winning film. But it's one of those things where I had to be in a really deep headspace to tone everything out, like to tune it all out, to be able to focus. And so that's work on top of the work on top of the work. And it's like this, like the Russian egg thing, where you just keep going down and down. And so yeah, I feel like I'm babbling, but I understand what you're talking about, Taja, and it really resonates with me, because I also have those struggles of like the gig work and chasing after money because of capitalism, and not actually attending to my needs on multi-layers, multiple levels. And so that's kind of a.
I don't think you're babbling. This all resonates, and thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. So I hope you don't feel that.
Thank you.
I want to. Yeah, no, it all resonates. I want to like copy everything you're both saying into the chat, because it's so great, and I think it definitely resonates with me. And as we're about this time has flown. We're about 10 minutes away from our end time, and I know at this time we wanted to start taking some questions from the group. I kind of want to combine two here that are connected to the conversation we're having right now and have some of the threads that we had before. One of the questions that came up, as a disabled person of color, what's their experience been in BIPOC majority spaces and disabled majority spaces? I like to kind of combine that with another question that was, how have you created welcoming spaces for others, and what do you do for that? And for me, it's been largely my experiences that have, like I have with running the music festival that I did with Scott, we had like a quiet space for introverts to go. We had like a tent that just was set up with like pillows and things like that, just as like that quiet space for people that don't like crowds, but they still want to do the community things. And a lot of it's been my experience in finding the places where I do find comfort and feel welcomed and accepted, and that I feel are accessible to me, like fully accessible, that has informed how I try to create those spaces. And then just those are the spaces I think where I tend to feel less than, and that not enoughness is not as loud in my ear. I'm curious how you've experienced those spaces and how that has then informed your creation of space, because we both enter spaces, we all enter spaces, and then we're also in charge of creating spaces. So I'd love to hear that from you. Atlas, how has that informed your event creation? And you talked a little bit about that with Translate.
It's very intentional about Translate on a lot of levels. It's very hard for folks of color in the drag community to get stage space. And I was very intentional that we needed to have a predominantly POC cast, and that it was to be intergenerational. My friend Jem, who came up with the name Translate and was the inspiration for creating it because of something that happened. And so I created this space that was insular. I basically put a nightclub in the theater of Bryant Lake Bowl. And Jem had put together a speed dating thing because Jem was saying, well, some people might just want to be a part of the crowd, but they don't want to be, a spotlight. So let's give them an activity to do. And so it was like the speed dating thing with these really beautiful questions that were prompts for conversations. And then there were blank Valentine's Day cards where people could write down contact information if they chose to. I provided food because I also experienced food insecurity, and I know that there maybe were people that spend their last $5 to come to the show, but they don't have money to buy really good food, except maybe an appetizer, but they're hungry for more. So we just had a full spread of like a taco bar, several pizzas, a salad, some chips and hummus. And then I got a free Costco cake because I had a $30 coupon. And so I got a big sheet cake and rainbow, happy Valentine's Day, chocolate, and people were like, didn't know whether they should have some of the cake. So I took the lid off and I cut just a gigantic piece of cake out of there. So just cut the corner and it was about this big. And I was like, okay, dig in, so like any size, whatever you want, look at me, and all of a sudden, like more than half the cake was gone by the end of the night. And so it was like trying to cover food insecurity and trying to cover inactivity versus activity and needing to socially distance from folks while being in the same space. And so it was really like taking a look at myself and what I needed and what I wanted, and then just talking with different people and saying, okay, this is the umbrella and this is Translate. And that was just so important. The neurodiversity of the POC, all the identities. I made sure that the flags that I put on my poster were for all of the other letters in the acronym that are not being represented: intersex, gender queer, gender fluid, polyqueer, polyamory, pansexual, transgender, and it was just like, let me put these flags on this poster so people know I am talking directly to you. And so that was kind of it, just bringing things that were invisible communities, invisible identities, and bringing them to the surface and plastering it on a poster, and then making a Facebook event and saying, this is for you and your allies. And I had some people say, well, I don't identify with any of these. And, I'm a lesbian and I'm white, and I don't know if I should be in that space. And I'm like, do you support the rest of these flags, the rest of these identities? yeah, well, then you need to be in the space, and you need to bring people like us into the space, or people like you who want to know more about us, bring them into this space. This is a learning space. This is a fun space. So that was kind of my take on that.
That's so great. I was just writing some notes. I like to write while I'm listening, and everything that you said, I feel so aligned with the number one being food. I mean, why is it so hard to feed yourself as an adult? I don't know, but I struggle with that a lot. So I try to bring food to the spaces I'm in, and food helps me settle into the spaces I'm in. And even the cutting the cake to model, yes, it's for you. And knowing who the yous are, knowing who the community is, who the audience is. And instead of putting on that kind of liberalism guise of everyone is welcome here, to say, I know who you are.
Mhm.
I mean, because in the space that say everyone is welcome here, that's not actually a very welcoming or permissionful space if you don't see yourself represented. And I think a lot about hospitality, and that is the way that anyone, collaborative artist or audience or community member, is welcomed into a space, from the first words that they see about it to the first face that they see when they come to the space, whether it's virtual or in person, to everything they know about how the space will hold itself or be held by others. And if the leadership in the space asks what people need, I try to always ask. And it's really hard to imagine that all spaces could be completely inclusive, right? I think that that's a myth, but putting the values of the space forward helps people understand what it is, and then ask, is it for me? Could I be here? Is that okay? Or ask, say, I'd really like to be here, but I also need this. Is that possible? And that's an intimacy. That's a kind of culture and community work that I think is essential, and often also not made time for, or comes from assumptions. And one of the notes I made before we got together, and I know we're almost at time, but I want to say this because it is so important to me, and it's a big part of my consulting work around disability justice, going beyond disability rights to inclusion of disabled folks from our fluctuating and ever-changing needs, is to resist any assumptions of something being easy or simple or no big deal, or using the word just stand up, just breathe. This is easy, this is simple. I think resisting those notions helps people baseline themselves in what I can do, and how I can be attentive and in generous attention in community and in spaces and in leadership.
Yeah, I'd like to
I'll leave it
piggyback off of that. Thank you, Taja. That was great. Like when you talk about all are welcome, it, you know, like I understand the intention behind it, but it does feel a little bit like all lives matter. And so if you're very specific about your intention, you will find what I found was translated was that, you know, people were able to come forward and just be like, okay, I'm just going to try this out. I don't know what to really expect, you know. And here's a note: I had never seen Transcendent Cabaret. I'd never heard the DJ before. I didn't hear or watch any of the newbie dragons that we had. So I walked in just as blind as everybody else who came to see the show and bought a ticket. And it was just like, I just trusted that it was going to be fabulous, and it was for what I could tell. But it's just kind of like, you know, I did ask people, you know, what can we do? Can you jump in, you know, the post here and tell me? And a lot of people just kind of didn't say much. And I had one person who had some questions, and that's what made the accessibility statement of 3D physicality. But yeah, it's just really, it's really observing your communities because they're intersecting, and listening, and then processing that, and then listening some more, and then asking questions that are very specific. And that's what's helped me with Translate and with anything else I've done.
Thank you so much. I know that we're at time. I could stay and chat for another long while. I really want to thank our ASL interpreters, Kate and Taylin, also for just everything that you've done throughout the presentation. Taja and Atlas, thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts and all your insights. I could have copied and pasted the whole thing in the chat because there's like, it was really wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. And Scott and Sam, thank you so much for bringing us together.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jamie, for moderating this too. Thank you, and this is Scott again. And thank you also to Jane, our cart captioner. As a captioner, caption user myself, I appreciate the excellent work you did. As always, I want a huge shout out to Sam, who is really the one, Sam Stallman, my colleague, who makes so much happen with such humility that she said she didn't want to talk at all during this event. But I'm gonna force you. I just wanted to close everything out. As JB said, time has flown. So much to process. It's such a privilege to be in this space. The intention of this series is to spark this conversation. Of course, we can't get everything in. So I invite everyone who's in attendance, who's watching this from the future, to think about the ways you can move these conversations forward. This should be the spark to start something. See, there we go. Spark to start. And I want to just pull out the quote that Taja said. It seems like so much like a dream in many ways to be imagining some of the things we imagine. The stakes are high, the pain is real. Thank you to Atlas for being so vulnerable about that and demonstrating how people with disabilities really have to face the reality of that pain and those stakes early and often. And which is why I'm so grateful to be working in a field where we get to talk about our dreams all day long. And recenter that. So thank you for being here and doing that. Thank you all. Stay connected, sign up for the registration if you haven't already to get some follow-up resources, and stay tuned for more of these events. Clearly, y'all want them. Thank you. Have a great night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.